Hello, this is the West Kent Talking podcast and the Southborough News YouTube channel. Today we're talking about water. I'm Martin Webber and I'm here with my colleague Zach Daunt-Jones and Liz Barnes. And all three of us have been talking to people at a meeting involving the Dry Wells Action Group, which was formed just a few days ago to discuss the water crisis in Tunbridge Wells. Zach, it was a meeting of more than an hour, wasn't it? What did you make of it all?
Well, I think it's clear that the people of Tunbridge Wells are angry. At times they were scared as to whether they could trust their water supply. And it's clear that they want something to be done. It's clear that they don't have faith in either South East Water as a company or in the leadership of the company. And it's clear that the people of Tunbridge Wells really are disgruntled of Tunbridge Wells at the moment.
Disgruntled, disgusted. Yes, so the South East Water didn't send any representatives to the meeting. Liz Barnes, you were listening and watching what everyone was saying. What did you make of it?
Well, I'm surprised that so many people turned out on a night like this, very wet, cold night in Tunbridge Wells. But obviously there's a real depth of feeling about the water crisis, ranging from sort of irritated to very, very angry people, who most of the people here could probably take over the business themselves and run it better. We've got people who've got expertise in crisis management attending. And I just think they're going to take it further. They're going to make the company be accountable for their actions.
They're not going to go away. There were around 100 people, I think, here from the public this evening who feel so strongly about the issue. So we've been talking to lots of people who attended. You can hear accounts of what they've said, the different perspectives, and the first interview that you'll see and hear was conducted by Liz.
My name's Marianne Amos.
And Marianne, what brought you here this evening to this water crisis meeting?
Well, I'm on the committee of the Dry Wells Action Group, and we formed this after having many outages of water recently along our road.
So when did you get your first water outage, Marianne?
We were back in end of November, December, when messages started coming up on our WhatsApp group for our road saying, has anyone lost water pressure? And so then we all reply, house numbers and yes, or then the messages then come in, I've got no water, and it's like this mad panic, and we're all going, what? No, not again. Let me go and flush a loo, and then you could turn a tap on, and that's it, absolutely empty.
So it was just word of mouth, no warning from South East Water at all?
No. There's been so much going on over since 2022. We kind of expect, you're always thinking, have I got some spare bottles of water in case? We're really organised on our road with buckets and water butts. So in our house, when you run a shower, you switch it on and literally let the water run into the bucket. So before you step in, rather than waste the coldish water, then in the summer you take that down, fill up your water butts. Right. And you're just adding to it every day rather than it's going down the drain.
Marianne, you told me earlier about your father who lives in Tunbridge Wells and he's 99. Is that right? Yeah. Do you want to tell the viewers what that's all about?
So my father got hit with the water being switched off. He wasn't aware of this because he doesn't have any social media. He'll watch the news, but if there's nothing reported on the news early days, then he knows nothing about it. So
he lives on his own, I gather.
Yeah. So when we go and visit him, we kind of keep him up to date with what's going on. And have you got water? So we'll check. So when his water went off, I got in touch with the South East Water team to say, you said you were delivering bottles to the vulnerable, but he's not had a delivery. And they told me he wasn't on the list and I had to reapply to get him back on the list. And I thought once you signed up, you were there for life, but obviously not. So when the water was delivered on one occasion, I went round the next day and I said, why haven't you had water delivered? And he said, well, there was last night. He said, and I looked outside, but it was too heavy for me to bring inside. And he said when he came out in the morning, it had vanished.
Someone had taken it?
Someone had taken it off his doorstep.
It's appalling, isn't it?
I know. And I know there's been a lot of reports of that, but yes, it has happened to us, so we know that's true. But also, dropping bottles of water on a doorstep or at the end of somebody's drive, if they are old and they can't lift, it's going to stay there till someone turns up that they know to help bring it in, and then you've got to cut open the packet, take it in a bottle at a time, unscrew the top, because that's very difficult for an old person to open. So you've got to open the top a bit, or you've got to pour some into a bucket, or actually unscrew your cistern, take the lid off and show them, just try and lift this amount at a jug at a time to fill it up and flush your toilet that way.
So the complications are more far-reaching than people would think.
Literally, you have to think ahead and work out how we're going to make this easy. So we do.
Yes, I imagine people with small children or the elderly found it the most difficult.
Yeah. It's from the moment you wake up till you go to bed, because the first thing you do is you go into the bathroom. You can't flush the chain. You go to wash your hands. You can't wash your hands. So I need to go downstairs, go outside in the rain, fill up a bucket from the water butt, carry it all the way upstairs, do that. Still can't wash my hands, go down, boil a big pan of water, tip it in it's a whole
very
operation. It's a whole operation, and you have to plan ahead.
If you could ask the water company one question, just one, what would it be?
Tell the truth. Why can't you tell the truth? We've had so many different excuses since 2022. We just don't believe them anymore because it doesn't make sense. And you hear one area has been told it's a pump issue, then the whole town were told it was a coagulant issue. Then you had that whole, you've got to boil water, but don't wash your children in it, and if you've got a cut or graze on your skin, don't use the water.
And I imagine somebody of your father's age, he wouldn't know to boil the water.
He doesn't have social media, so we would have to go and write a list of do's and don'ts. But if we're working and we can't get there that day, then he wouldn't know.
I'm Jonathan Hawker, and I'm the founder and the chairman of Dry Wells Action.
So tell us, what prompted you to start Dry Wells Action?
Absolute rage, to be perfectly honest. It was the third time we lost water completely in our household. We had the incident a couple of years ago around Christmas. We had the incident at the end of last year before Christmas. We thought we were through it. We weren't. And after, almost a week of intermittent water, it just went completely, and I just had enough, really. And so I decided that I would launch a campaign group and campaign for a resilient water supply for Tunbridge Wells, and that's what I've done.
So how did it personally affect you, the loss of water? What did you have to do?
Well, having absolutely no water in the house means that, you survive with bottled water. I hadn't any planning. I had no water butts, so I literally had to rely on bottled water. And I can tell you that if I wanted to flush a toilet, I needed 5 litres. If I wanted to do the dishes, that was 1.5 litres. If I wanted to use a camping shower that I purchased, that took about 4 litres to have a shower. Washing clothes was an absolute no-no. All dishes are hand done. It was very, very difficult. But of course, I had it relatively easy. Other people who are a bit older than me, they really struggle to carry these 2-litre bottles into the house, and we've had a number of reports of people whose water was effectively just stolen from their doorsteps. And then, young families, mums trying to look after toddlers who, obviously need to be kept clean. They need to be, clothed and fed in a hygienic fashion. They really struggled. So, I had it relatively easy, but it was really tough for everybody, I think.
And what's your message to South East Water? What do you want to hear from South East Water?
I think South East Water really needs to hear the message that, it's high time they invested in modernising the infrastructure that serves this town. They issued a video just a few days ago which showed, the problem with the system. And the problem is in the system lies in the Pembury treatment works, which can only produce a maximum of 105 litres of water a second flat out for a population that needs 155 litres a second. So the scale of Tunbridge Wells is too big for the infrastructure that exists. And even with top-ups into our water tank in Blackhurst Lane of 30 litres a second, we're just not hitting the amount that we need. And that's why this town is seeing constant water tankers to that facility, because without it, we'd be exactly where we were before.
So, do you think South East Water just haven't invested enough? What would you do? You blame privatisation? Do you think they've just creamed the money off the top? What do you think's happening there?
I am not a financial expert and can't speak to what South East Water have done with their money. But they did send, every customer a document recently which pointed to the fact that out of every pound spent by us on water, 17 pence was going directly to the servicing of debt. Now, I would argue that, in a business where you're effectively, losing a 17% margin directly in interest, there's a sustainability problem. What I can say also is that it's pretty obvious they haven't invested in the infrastructure. The fact is that it is a hard fact that the infrastructure can't cope with the size of this population. It's a hard fact that this company is losing, huge volumes of water each day through leaks and is struggling to address them. This is a water company in trouble, and they either need to invest and sort it out, or we need them replaced.
How would you rate South East Water's communication at times of crisis?
I'm going to have to moderate my language because I think viewers don't really want to hear what I really think. I'm no longer laughing about it. If you look at this style of communication first, they communicate by terse text message, often inaccurately. So, your water will be restored tomorrow is more of a manana situation. It generally isn't returned tomorrow. Nobody believes them. The other point that they like to make is that there will be an intermittent supply. Well, I would argue that an intermittent supply suggests that water will be coming and going, not that it will be switched on for a period of 2 hours after people have travelled to work and to go immediately then and not return for the rest of the working day, so that when they return home from work, there's still no water. That just seems a vehicle to ensure that nobody can access this core service that's so essential for life.
There's more and more house building going on in Tunbridge Wells. There are targets. How do you feel about that?
I think everybody has a sympathy with the need to have affordable homes for a growing population. But there's an obvious line in the sand here, and that is, if developers want to create new properties, new infrastructure needs to be provided also. How can you grow a town without increasing the water supply to that town? Developers need to carry the cost of increased infrastructure if they want to develop new properties in towns like this. Otherwise, all we're doing is increasing the problems for communities across the country. So homes, yes, but more infrastructure too, please.
So you think that developers should be contributing more? Perhaps there should be a fund that goes into developing the local infrastructure?
We all know that the cost of properties has just gone through the roof, not just in Tunbridge Wells, everywhere really. Developers, they do very, very well out of creating new homes for people. I'm sure that they would understand that in order to sell those properties, they need a home with a reliable water supply. They need to put their hands in their pockets too.
The reason we are here tonight is because thanks to creating an action group, I have met an amazing group of neighbours who have worked tirelessly for the last week to bring this meeting to life at very, very short order. So could you please just join me in saying thank you to the committee that has made this meeting happen. The difficulty here is that We've got South East Water saying that they can't attend because they're being investigated, and the investigators, the regulators, saying they can't come because they're investigating, and that leaves us in a little bit of a void of information.
My name's Charles Hedges. I'm a chartered geologist and I specialise in hydrogeology and ground engineering.
Can we talk about Pembury Waterworks? Is Pembury Waterworks an up-to-date works?
I haven't visited, I haven't seen it, but the lack of continuous monitoring of the water coming into the works and the lack of electronic data recording, as mentioned by the Chief Inspector of the Drinking Water Inspector, in my mind seems rather dated. I would expect full automation to really come in 20-25 years ago. And this is one of the things the Chief Inspector says. Well, they didn't do a jar test, which is a simple chemical test, literally in jam jars, to see whether coagulations work. And there was no electronic recording of data, and they were flying blind. That was his exact comments. And this is quite difficult when you're listening to someone and you're trying to understand the technical he seemed to say that they weren't actually recording the inflow into the works. And as that varied, therefore the coagulation varied, which is one of the causes of the problems. And I find that quite incredible, bearing in mind that they've got water from the springs, which will vary. Spring water varies quite a lot in flow and also quality. They're bringing water in from Buell, plus the other places. I think we've got Sevenoaks, Tunbridge, St Hills and Groombridge. All those will have different chemistry. And therefore, you need to monitor that both from the flow and the chemistry to make sure that your coagulation is correct. And once you get incorrect coagulation, it fails, you have to close the works down. So that's why the Chief Inspector said they were flying blind.
And the Chief Inspector, the Drinking Water Inspectorate, has been saying for 5 years that Pembury Waterworks is an issue, haven't they?
Well, yes. The earliest he mentioned was 2018, I think 2020, 22, 23, and obviously 25 and 26 now. And he then said, which I wasn't quite sure, there were 20 other incidences. Now, what they are, I don't know, but it quite frankly horrifies me. Bear in mind, this is a town of, 70,000 people.
And you've worked in the water industry all over the country, I understand.
I've worked in private water supply all over the country, and I've worked for a water company, yes.
So, from your experience, are there any other water companies that would have assets in the same condition as perhaps Pembury would appear to be?
We have asset management plans, and we're now on 8. This is what surprised me. I haven't visited the works, but what has been said as far as monitoring, that's why I would have thought the sort of failures that the Chief Inspector of Drinking Water mentioned, I would have thought those investments would have made between 2000 and 2005.
So the works is potentially 20 years out of date?
Well, based on what he's saying, the lack of automation, bearing in mind the potential fluctuations in water quality. This is what I said. I said we've had a series of dry periods, and I've actually was involved with developing a private borehole in, I think, 2005. It could be roughly there. And one of the issues was that the spring water had become incredibly acidic in summer. It was coming out of a sandstone aquifer. It was probably iron parietes was being oxidized. It was creating sulfuric acid and iron, and pH was dropping down to 2. The iron went up very high. Now, that's why I said that they should have talked to the British Geological Survey, the EA, and gone back and looked at things like the Southern Water Authority records and other records back to, say, 1970, and say, what is the range of chemistry that we can expect from springs in very dry summers? And we've got, as I mentioned before, 73, 76, 88, 92, 2003, 2004, 2006. And I find that going back and inspecting records, the fact they didn't do it, I find rather odd.
So do you think the problems that we've experienced are a lack of investment, a lack of planning, or a lack of leadership, or a combination of all three?
What I would see is a lack of technical expertise. What I don't understand is that you have a board with Hinton and Farmer, but there's no chartered engineer, chartered chemist or chartered microbiologist on the board. I find that very odd. You've got a water company, they're the three most important aspects. It's not a sewage company. Why aren't there people with those technical expertise on the board? I'm worried about the lack of technical speed in the area of a chartered civil engineer who understands water supply, a lack of a chartered chemist who understands water process treatment, and I'm worried about a lack of chartered microbiologists who understands microbiology. If you look at the statement put out by the DWA in the 2024, there was a whole area of need for testing for bacteria. So obviously Pembury has had a potential issue with bacteria. So right across the company, there should be a director of microbiology on the board.
I am Matthew Sankey, owner of Sankey's. We have restaurants in the town and fishmongers, as well as an online presence.
So how do you think the water outages have affected your business, Matthew?
Well, it significantly. We've had businesses that have had to close because they haven't had potable water, but we've had other businesses where people haven't visited us because the perception is the town is shut.
So although you've been open, people just haven't been out and about going out to restaurants?
They've been far too busy trying to get water for themselves at home, queuing up for the water bottle stations.
You're Jim Collins and Sons. I spoke to Josh, and he was explaining to me that on one day he took £14. I did ask him, can you buy him a shop for 14? But I just find it amazing how much of our local economy was devastated by what we all consider just to be a normal utility. The compensation package that's coming from South East Water is coming in dribs and drabs and doesn't seem to follow any form of common sense. Some people have started receiving
Like their water supply.
Yes. It's about £1,300, and that doesn't matter how much water you use, how big your business is, or what have you. I think we understand that that's coming from a specific pot that South East Water have put together, and it's nowhere near enough. I haven't received any of that yet. The communication from South East Water was, as we all know, was completely tragic. Some businesses, so if you're up on Mount Ephraim, we actually get our water from Langton Green. So whilst the south end of town had no water whatsoever, on Mount Ephraim we were all washing and running as normal. But all of a sudden we'd open the doors and no one would come in. But where the issue becomes there is this week, we don't get any compensation because our water wasn't shut off. But we're not going to get paid out of our insurance because we could still open. So the problem becomes enormous when you start thinking the financial damage that's been caused. So it is a huge problem. I don't know where the solution is. Obviously, fixing the water will be a problem, but we have to fix that. But people need to be compensated. There are going to be businesses that are in some serious trouble. This is, for most businesses in retail and hospitality, December was the best bit of trading, and we lost a massive chunk of that.
I'm Jamie Johnson, one of the Liberal Democrat borough councillors for Pantars. I'm also a local resident and have been all my life.
So, the water issue has been a major issue for Tunbridge Wells. How do you feel South East Water have performed over the last few months?
Well, to be honest, there are no words really. I still can't believe how. Myself, I've had no water. My customers have had no water. the residents have had no water. It seems to be spreading, and it just feels like something has gone so terribly wrong. And obviously nobody would have wanted this. It almost reminds me of a pothole in the road that, all of a sudden there was one and then suddenly there's hundreds, and it feels like this is what's happened with South East Water. I have no idea, so what I'm saying is just from personal thought, but it just seems, I can't, we just want to know, don't we? We just want to know what's happened, why it's happening, are we safe? That's what people want to know. That's the main things.
How do you rate the leadership of South East Water? Dave Hinton, the chief executive, was somewhat notable by his absence in the problems before Christmas. How do you rate the leadership of South East Water?
Well, I mean, can you really call it a leadership? But then, with that said, he hasn't run away. So I haven't met him. I haven't spoken to him. I would like to, but Mike and the others, I'm sure have. So they would be far better to comment. But I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. But it's a minefield, isn't it? Really, a minefield. I have great faith in Mike Martin and the team. They're working so hard dealing with South East Water and everything. So I think as soon as they are aware of exactly what's happening, they will announce to us all. I say forgive me for not having the knowledge myself. I just wanted to come along tonight as a resident, but as a supporter of all of everybody here. I don't have the information I would like to have, but I don't think anybody else has the information either.
Hi, I'm Jerry Bolton. I live in the North Farm area. My background, career-wise, is business continuity, disaster recovery, disaster management, crisis management, and I'm currently working in the nuclear industry as well, which is very highly regulated. So I've got quite a passion about what's going on in Tunbridge Wells and how it's affecting the residents.
Have you been surprised at how South East Water have handled the whole situation?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, as part of the critical national infrastructure, you'd expect an organisation like that to have a dedicated crisis management team, business continuity and the associated communications that go with it to manage that. And there's been nothing coming out from the water companies apart from something one way, saying, we hope to have your water back on tomorrow. No ability at all for people to make inquiries, and it's been a complete disaster. I mean, everyone knows what the answers are. The water company's hiding, and as I mentioned to somebody else as well, I think it comes down to sort of planning permissions as well. I think the council are just as complicit when they grant permission to very large housing estates, as you know, we've got one up near Forest Road. It should be a complete stop on any development until those companies invest in the infrastructure and pay towards the cost, and that is before the actual development takes place. The system is antiquated, it's been underinvested for years and years and years, as you heard from our scientific guy, and we need to get those basics right. I just cannot believe how inept they are. It's frightening.
How many water outages did you personally suffer from?
We suffered from about 5. And even now, the water is on, smells of chlorine, so we're filtering it and then boiling it as well. You just can't trust the quality of the water. And even if you do get the water tested by Southern Water, you won't be able to trust what the results are when it comes out, because I think trust has gone completely with this organisation. The only way is to get rid of the chief executive and start afresh. And of course, again, the regulatory authorities, they're made up of people from the water authorities anyway, hence the lack of progress in getting any of this resolved. They're sitting on their hands.
My name is Christopher Jackson. I'm a resident in Sandown Park. I actually live in Sandown Close, and we see the tankers passing our house every day, with the tankers which are topping up the Blackhurst Lane Reservoir.
So tell us what it's been like for you as a resident over the last couple of months with regards to water.
Well, we've managed reasonably well because we're in an older house which has cold water systems in the attic. But houses that have been on a direct supply, or modern houses, since the water regulations changed in 1999 have had a big problem. And some of our neighbours are in that situation where they've not been able to shower or do washing up. And for them it's been or flush toilets for that matter. Though we've never actually run out of water, we have been very careful about how we've managed our water usage.
How do you feel South East Water have performed over the last few months?
Well, since the end of November, I think they've performed very poorly. Their communications have been very poor. They've made lots of promises about deadlines which have not been met. And I still don't believe that the true situation has been told to us as consumers. And that's my big question, because it's clear that supply from Pembury treatment works is still not back to normal. Otherwise, we wouldn't be needing the tankers.
So what would you like to hear from South East Water?
I'd like to hear an honest explanation of what went wrong. I'd like to know why, in the view of Marcus Rink, the head of the Drinking Water Inspectorate, in his view, the problem could have been resolved, it should have been detected earlier in November and could have been resolved using their existing coagulants. I'd like to know why what didn't happen, and I'd like to know what the real cause of the problem was and how we can be sure that it's been properly fixed.
Do you trust your water supply?
In what regard?
Well, do you have faith that when you turn the tap on, there's going to be water there? Do you trust that the water is safe to drink?
As far as I'm aware, the water has always been safe to drink. Even when we were told to boil it, that wasn't strictly necessary, because they were tankering in fresh water from other plants. So, in regard to the quality of the water, I don't have a concern, but I do have a concern about the reliability of the supply.
And Dave Hinton, South East Water's chief executive, how would you rate his performance over the last few months?
I wouldn't rate it as highly as he rates himself. And I think one other comment about the water company is it would be helpful for everybody if we knew when the water was going to be cut off, so we could plan our usage around that. I mean, just having intermittent supplies without any warning is a real problem.
So how would you rate their communication, the water company's communication?
To start with, I would say maybe 4 or 5 out of 10. It got much better and it got much more frequent. But clearly they were on a pretty steep learning curve because they started from a pretty low base.
Thanks for watching. If you found the report helpful, please like the video and subscribe for future updates on this and other local issues.